Oh, you guys have started shooting. Alright, so recently I was at the airport and I wanted to take a look at the boarding time for my flight. But the TV displaying that information was slightly far away. So I was also lazy to walk to that TV and take a look at it. So I fished out the Find X8 Pro and the iPhone 16 Pro Max, zoomed in 25x just to see how these two photos can capture the image and which one was better. And here are the results. Now, there were many moments like this when I was testing the Find X8 Pro where I felt like I was enjoying using this new OPPO phone over the Apple iPhone 16 Pro Max. Obviously, not everything's hunky-dory. There are some concerns with this phone, but I think OPPO's done a good job with this. And this is definitely one of those underrated phones that you might overlook, which I don't want you to do. So stay tuned till the end for my detailed review of the Find X8 Pro. Hi, I'm Arshad. You're watching Trakin English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. The Find X8 Pro might look a little plain and boring in renders, but in real life, it's actually very well put together and it does feel premium. So what you get is this soft touch glass which blends into a nice soft touch matte aluminum frame as well, and it just feels very nice to hold in the hand. But more importantly, this black variant of the phone measures 8.24 millimeters in thickness and weighs about 215 grams, definitely lighter and slimmer than the iPhone 16 Pro Max that I'm holding. Now, why does this matter? Because of two reasons. One, the Find X8 Pro actually has a larger silicon carbide battery compared to the iPhone 16 Pro Max. That's not it. If the iPhone 16 Pro Max has a triple camera setup with one periscope lens, this one has a 4 camera setup or a quad camera setup with 2 periscope lenses. Now, with those 2 points in mind, don't you think that the Find X8 Pro is a feat of engineering from OPPO? Well, compared to the iPhone 16 Pro Max, it definitely does feel like that. I also like this symmetrically aligned circular camera module. It does look very nice. And what OPPO's done this time around is that it's made it 40% thinner or smaller than the Find X7 Ultra's circular camera module. It doesn't protrude too much from the rear, and when you place it on a table, it doesn't have too much table wobble either because it's balanced properly. Basically, there are tight tolerances everywhere around. The symmetry is also very, very good. But yes, there is a slight little, thing that I must mention is the fact that the phone does feel slightly top heavy compared to something like the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, you do get IP68 rating on the phone. You can submerge it up to 1.5 meters of depth for 30 minutes, but you also get IP69 rating now, which means that the phone can also survive jet sprays of water. And if you're stuck in a torrential downpour somewhere in Cherrapunji, then it should be fine. As for the display protection, the OPPO Find X8 Pro has Corning Gorilla Glass Victus 7i on top of it. Now, I did drop the phone once and there's not even a scratch to show for it, so I think it's good enough in daily usage. The phone is of course durable and sturdy, but more importantly, it's also functional because you do get a very useful alert slider. From OnePlus, yes. But interestingly, OPPO has quick button on this, but of course it's used as a shutter button. Essentially, from anywhere within the system, you can do like a double click of this button and it'll open the camera app and a single click will take a photo. And OPPO calls it a tap, but it's kind of a click, I feel it. And in a landscape orientation, you can swipe on it to sort of zoom. It should have been available in vertical as well, but we'll take this. In any case, I'm not a fan of these shutter buttons, but the one on the OPPO has been tuned well. You also get the option to control the intensity of your tap or click. And I felt that in a clutch when I quickly wanted to take a photo with the phone, it did come in handy once in a while. So I'm glad. But adding this button creates one problem in engineering, is that the volume rocker and the power button had to be pushed up. So the power button is still reachable, but the volume rocker is a little too at the top. Again, minor niggle, you can get used to it, but it's a problem nonetheless. Now to close things on the design front, you've got an infrared blaster. You've also got a Type-C Gen 3.2 port, which is fantastic. So overall, the Find X8 Pro is a very well designed phone. It's got great build quality, and more importantly, it's got a lot of functionalities. Not just the design, but the display is also fantastic. You get a nice, big, bright AMOLED panel with LTPO technology, which means that the screen can refresh down to 1 Hz and up to 120 Hz with variable in between. But more importantly, when I was using the phone, this is one of the smoothest displays that I've used. And the reason for that is also the fact that the operating system has parallel animations now. Yes, the same thing that I mentioned in the Oxygen OS 15 video. If you haven't watched that yet, go check it out. So like typical tech nerds, we also went ahead and opened and closed apps back to back right next to an iPhone 16 Pro Max. And you can see for yourself that the Find X8 Pro is definitely smoother. In daily usage though, when I was using these phones, I generally tended to pick the Find X8 Pro, especially when I was using Twitter or X. And the main reason for that, because scrolling was at a continuous 120 Hz on the Find X8 Pro, where iPhone sort of throttles down to 80 Hz to save power. Not a bad thing, but if I can get continuous 120Hz scrolling, then I'll take that instead. And considering the trend for 2025 Android flagships is micro quad curved OLED panels, this one's also micro quad curved. I face zero ghost touches on this display, which is very good, but the same I cannot say for that quick button, because generally when I was using the phone, it would get clicked. Thankfully, double click is to open the app, so it wouldn't open the app, so that's good. Now on the display, OPPO has also upgraded the fingerprint scanner. I would have liked if it was slightly higher, but still I'll take this. But more importantly, OPPO's haptics and haptic feedback with the X-axis linear motor is exceptional. It's easily the top 3 for me. I watched a lot of content on this phone. I actually watched VTN on the flight, and the quality of the video is exceptional. But more importantly, on Netflix, you also get support for Dolby Vision right out of the box. Definitely Netflix and YouTube, when you're playing HDR content, it makes use of that 4500 nits of peak brightness, which definitely comes in handy. But more importantly, when you take it outdoors, it's plenty bright and it's plenty legible, so I have no concerns there at all. Having said that, I think that Android brands should use that anti-reflective glass coating that Corning has given to Samsung for the Galaxy S24 Ultra, because that is truly a game changer. Now to close off that multimedia loop, I tried out, and you get support for every single Bluetooth high-res codec that you can think of. And the stereo speakers, while they sound rich and they can get fairly loud, I felt that they could get louder. Take a listen to it right next to the iPhone 16 Pro Max and let me know which one you prefer. So, the Find X8 Pro is actually the first phone to come with MediaTek's Dimensity 9400 in India. Apart from that, you also do get LPDDR5X RAM type, UFS 4.0 storage. You don't get the newer LPDDR5T or UFS 4.1, which is okay. And the only variant that OPPO is actually selling in India is the 16GB 512GB variant of the phone. These are of course top of the line specs, and I really like the performance of the Dimensity 9400. Now in Geekbench 6, both single core and multi-core scores, the Dimensity 9400 sort of loses out to the A18 Pro and the Snapdragon 8 Elite, but the scores are really much higher than that of last year's Dimensity 9300 and the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. And as for the storage, the read-write speeds are excellent. Now we also did run the CPU throttle test where we engage 40 threads for 30 minutes, and the CPU does throttle quite a bit, but that's not necessarily a problem, and I'll tell you why. Stay tuned for that. But where the Dimensity 9400 inside this Find X8 Pro shines is actually in gaming performance. The 3D Mark wireless test score that we got is fantastic, especially for a flagship phone. And that Immortalis G925 that you get with the Dimensity 9400 is a beast when it comes to gaming. There's one more test that we ran, which is Solar Bay test, and in that, the ray tracing frame rates were actually higher than the A18 Pro and the Snapdragon 8 Elite. But more importantly, in our 30-minute Genshin Impact test, we got an average FPS of 59.7. It was mostly stable. There were a couple of occasions when it went into loading screens, so the frame rates went down. But otherwise, you can actually expect close to 60 FPS, even if you play 1 hour of gaming, because I'll tell you why. Because the phone doesn't get hot and the power draw is really low. The temperatures didn't even cross 35-36 degrees, which is fantastic. Honestly, I'm super happy with the Find X8 Pro, especially for gaming, and the thermals are in check like I mentioned. So the 5910 mAh silicon carbide battery inside this phone actually gave me nearly 8 hours of screen on time on multiple occasions. 5 to 6 hours in my usage is good. Anything above 6, close to 7 is fantastic. Anything above 7, and let's call it Oscar-worthy battery life, because this is really good. And it charges at a healthy 80 watts. Of course, you don't get the kind of crazy charging speeds anymore. And I could charge the phone from 0 to 100, actually 1% to 100% in about 55 minutes, which is not too bad. There's also that 50 watt wireless charging support, reverse wireless charging support, all of that is present. I've also been testing network performance with both Airtel and Jio, and the network performance has been fantastic. The call quality is also really good. You also get support for Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 5.4, NFC, all of that is present. Alright, now it's time to talk about the camera setup on the OPPO Find X8 Pro. You've got a quad camera setup, the specs for which should be up on your display right now. But what you need to take a look at clearly is the fact that you've got dual periscope setups, and it's a W prism periscope, so that's how they managed to save that space. Anyway, I did test out the cameras and compared it to the iPhone 16 Pro Max just to see where it stands. But remember that the Find X8 Pro is a much more affordable phone. Alright, so the primary camera on the Find X8 Pro captures detailed photos, but it's not as detailed as iPhone 16 Pro Max's 24 megapixel outputs. Despite that, I still think that the Find X8 Pro does a very good job. It's sharp enough, it's got fine textures, and I genuinely don't have a problem with the 12MP outputs. The Find X8 Pro's HDR performance is also tuned fairly well, but it does tend to crush the shadows a little. The iPhone 16 Pro Max is the benchmark shot here. The HDR performance is actually very good. But the Find X8 Pro's color reproduction is incredible. It is actually more neutral compared to the iPhone. If you see the reds on the table, OPPO has gotten it spot on instead of making it a warm color like the iPhone has. But when you take a look at the second shot, you'll see that both these phones have very similar color reproduction where they try to keep it neutral or true to source. What's also done well is the color sense consistency with the ultra wide angle camera. The colors match really well on both the Find X8 Pro and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, the skin tones on the Find X8 Pro are not entirely off the mark, but you do not get the neutral accuracy of the iPhone 16 Pro Max, so the 16 Pro Max is actually better. Against the harsh backlight, both the phones do a good job of ensuring the face doesn't become too dark. Also, while the iPhone's HDR tuning is more true to life, the slight pop in the Find X8 Pro shot gives it that social media look which I kinda like. Also, the trees in the rear look crisp and sharp but not over-processed, which is the problem with the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, you can shoot portrait shots with both the phones at varying focal lengths. You can start at 24mm, go up to 120mm on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and with the Find X8 Pro, you get Hasselblad portraits. So you get 23mm, 35mm, 48mm, 73mm, 85mm, and 135mm capabilities. And across different focal lengths, what I noticed is the iPhone definitely has the more subdued, close to neutral look, as opposed to the slightly skin color boosted and brightened portraits of OPPO. But one look at the semantic segmentation, edge cutout, and the depth mapping, you can tell that the OPPO's algorithm is fantastic. It even picks out the individual strands of Shrikant's morning hair. Finally, in low light, I was slightly disappointed with the Find X8 Pro because it crushes the shadows a lot. In fact, the iPhone is better here, which is saying something considering the fact that the iPhone has never been the benchmark for low light photography, and therefore both OPPO and Apple definitely need to pull up their socks here. Having said that, OPPO does pull back a very strong win with the secondary and the tertiary camera, starting with the ultra wide, which definitely captures more details than the iPhone 16 Pro Max's ultra wide in daylight. Now you can zoom in to see the difference for yourself. And the same is also true for the low light ultra wide angle shots where the Find X8 Pro is better. Now selfies from OPPO make you look good with a lot of details as well. In fact, selfie portraits, selfies taken against harsh backlighting, and even the low light selfies are all superior on OPPO compared to Apple. Finally, let's talk about that zoom performance, and clearly OPPO is actually beating the iPhone fair and square. At 2x, both are equally matched in terms of detail retention, which was to be expected. But at 3x, OPPO has a slight edge in details because it's got a dedicated 3x camera. At 5x, iPhone has a slight edge, but not so much to make the OPPO look bad. The gap is kind of closing. But at zoom levels from 6x to 10x to 25x, OPPO's zoom performance is miles better. In fact, the AI telescope zoom capabilities kick in at about 10x and beyond, which is why even the 60x and 120x are sometimes usable. Especially when there's text involved, it sharpens the textures a lot, but does smoothen out some of the details by, aggressive noise correction. But all of this is happening in post. When you take the photo, you won't immediately see the difference. It will actually transfer to the Photos app, and over there you'll see some AI processing happening, taking a little bit of time, but the difference is palpable. Now with video recording, the OPPO Find X8 Pro can shoot 4K 60fps Dolby Vision videos using all the cameras in the stack: primary, ultra wide, telephoto, even the selfie. You get similar levels of Dolby Vision HDR tuning and sound quality on both the phones at 4K 60fps. iPhone's stabilization is slightly better, but OPPO's actually capturing more details thanks to the higher bitrate video recording quality. In fact, the audio bitrate is higher as well. So now this is a 4K 60fps video recording using the primary camera on both the phones, and this is recording at Dolby Vision. I'm walking with these phones. Pan into the sky. This is what the dynamic range looks like. Of course, if you do shoot with ProRes on the iPhone, you will get higher bitrate video recording, but that will also take up more space. To balance things off, I think OPPO is doing it slightly better. In fact, I'd say OPPO is better at low light video recording. Now, because largely the footage is similar looking, but OPPO has far better noise control, and because of that higher bitrate video recording, it also captures more details. Ultra wide angle video is also of superior quality on the OPPO, because while for the most part the footages look similar again, you get higher bitrate video recording. Although I feel that the selfie video recording is definitely better on the iPhone, and even when you zoom in, iPhone does it smoothly. It's also got better details and quality. I like that better. Now, with respect to features, one of the things that I noticed with the OPPO is that it's definitely a very fast shooter. The burst mode captures 7 frames per second, and it can really capture really fast, so you can freeze frame if there's an action subject being shot. In any case, I'm super duper impressed with the performance of the Find X8 Pro's camera setup. Just needs a few tweaks to HDR and the skin tones, and you might have one of the best flagship cameras out there. In fact, I like it better than the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Alright, so now let's talk about ColorOS 15 and, of course, I like it. The main reason for that is that crazy smooth new animation engine, which I did mention before. But more importantly, there are a bunch of useful features as well. Firstly, the live activity spill can now show you cards of multiple apps. The split notification panel is also a nice move, and I do like the new rearranged layout as well. There are these flux themes that integrate with the AOD where the text actually has depth with the wallpaper itself, especially if there's a subject, and it looks very, very impressive. There's Google's circle to search feature and the option to share directly with the iPhone as well. All of these are definitely godsend. There's also OPPO's very own AI Studio, which lets you generate images like the name suggests. But more importantly, what I like is the AI toolbox, which actually has a bunch of tools within that whole ecosystem, and they're pretty useful. There's a tool that lets you summarize text. There's also AI Speak for AI to actually read out content to you. And there's AI Writer, which is similar to Apple's writing tools that helps you correct spelling and grammar, change the tone of the conversation, yada yada. Of course, there are AI-specific photo editing tools with which you can actually increase the clarity of the image by upscaling them. And there's also one to unblur blurred photos, plus the option to erase, things from the image itself. But the eraser feature has now got reflection eraser, and it definitely does come in handy once in a while. There was a shot that I took of the Vistara flight through the window, and there were clear reflections. And the moment you sort of use that tool, you can see that the reflections get cut out. So I like the OS experience, but more importantly, OPPO is also promising 5 years of software updates and 6 years of security updates on the phone, which is reassuring. But OPPO does bundle third-party apps with the phone, some of which could be useful for some people, but most of them can be uninstalled or disabled, which is a good thing. I'm genuinely surprised after using the OPPO Find X8 Pro, and I'm glad that OPPO picked this phone to make a comeback to India, because the experience of using this phone is actually very good and something that I didn't expect. Yes, there are problems, but these are minor niggles and they don't really matter in the long run. Now, while I did compare the Find X8 Pro to the iPhone 16 Pro Max throughout the video, it's not the right comparison. You guys also know it. What we need to compare this phone to is the Vivo X200 Pro and the OnePlus 13. And when these phones come to India, definitely those comparisons will happen. So stay tuned for that. So what do you guys think of the OPPO Find X8 Pro? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Let me know in the comment section below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, keep tracking and stay safe.